Welcome back to the channel, guys. This is part 2 of the 7.8 swap and the Ford 5000. So this is what the tractor looked like at the end of part 1. In this video, our big push now is to get the engine, frame rails, everything all buttoned up so that I can roll this tractor around without having anything support the tractor. This is what the tractor is going to look like at the end of this video. So we've got a lot of ground to cover, guys. Let's jump right in. Let's start this video off with showing how I made this engine bracket. This is a 3/4 inch bolt. Goes in there nice. I'm going to go machine a piece 1.5 inches wide, 3 inches long, so I can start making this motor mount. That guy. That'll do the trick. Alright, the old Grizzly lathe is taking a 20,000ths pass. That thing is slinging material. That thing works like a charm. Hello. Got a 5/8 drill bit here. I'm just opening up the center so that I can get a boring bar in there to do the final dimension. So I cut this piece off. It's with a hacksaw. I'm going to face that down. It's about 3 inches. That's a 5/8 hole. I'm going to run the 5/8 drill bit through that, and then we can start opening up that ID with a boring bar. So instead of using these boring bars that I have, which take a long time, I went and I bought one of these Milwaukee, titanium coated jobs. This is a 3/4 inch. I noticed how well this 5/8 bolt fit in the piece that I parted here. And I thought, you know what, if that fits as good as this does in the 3/4, I'm gonna be styling. So we're gonna go ahead and use this 3/4 drill bit. It's gonna be a lot quicker. That took just about 2 minutes to bore that hole out. That drill bit left a really nice finish. So quick, easy. It's nice to have drill bits in your tool selection. I mean, I got a machine shop here to some degree. I should have the right stuff anyway. So that was well worth the 30 bucks, 40 bucks, whatever it was. So here's the first part that I made for the engine mount. Basically, that goes like that. And underneath here you can see the groove that I cut out. And there's a little gap right here. You can't really see it on camera, but there's a gap there. And it's tight here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn a piece that goes in here. Basically just a bolt for, I don't have any other things to show you. But basically I'm going to turn a bolt with a shoulder on the lathe, and then I'm going to weld the two together right here, and it's going to be a super solid upper engine mount. So there's a picture of that. So the material I used to make these pieces is just a hot rolled carbon based steel. This was started out as 2 inch. This is now 1.5 inches. However, I wanted some cold rolled material like this PTO shaft to make the actual pins that are going to be replacing these bolts. Cold rolled is just a little bit stronger. It can still be welded just like the hot rolled material. This particular piece was a destroyed PTO shaft from a bad pulley that came off an old F932 front mower that I had. I probably did this 2 years ago. I replaced this shaft. So anyway, we're going to cut this out, and we're going to turn this into a couple pins. Alright, so I turned this piece to where it just barely fits in there. I'm going to cut this off, turn this down so it's nice and smooth, and then we will be ready to make another one just like it. Alright, so you're finally starting to see what I see in my mind whenever I think about this. As you can see, I've got a big grind, or a big flat spot out of this piece And what I'm going to do is put a shim in here, tighten this down, and then weld this together. Take out the shim, tighten this down, and that is going to be an ultra strong bell housing adapter, I guess you'd say. So anyway, I'm going to do 2 of these and then tie them together with a big chunk of metal, like 3/8. And that thing is going to be solid. So I've got this ground down. It used to be round. I've got this ground down. So what's going to happen is, now that I've got this missing, I can fill all of this with weld and really put some material back in there. That's going to be a lot of structure added there. So I've got 15 thousandths worth of shim in there. I've tightened down this bolt. The plan is, once I weld this, I'm going to take these shims out and I'm going to tighten this down. I'm hoping that it will draw this in just a little bit. And then I can measure the gap and order a shim, a 3/4 inch round shim to fit in here, so that'll be perfectly tight. It may not need a shim. I may have to shim here so that this can get tighter, because ideally I want this bell housing to be sandwiched really tight. So anyway, it's going to be a little bit of an experiment, but I think 15 thousandths in my mind's eye is going to be perfect. But I'm going to do one here before I do the other, just to experiment and see. So I'm going to weld this and I'll show you what it looks like after. So this is a finished product, at least for one side of the engine right here. It took me quite a bit of welding. I was using 7018, just a stick welder to do most of the heavy hitting, if you will. And then I used a MIG welder to kind of cap it off nice. I wanted to make this look like one piece. Doesn't have to be perfect, I could have spent more time, but I've got a lot of time in this as it is. So, but as you can see, I've got probably a good 3/8 of an inch weld here. Same on this side. And if you remember before, I had this big V cut. That whole thing is filled with weld now. So this is what I've designed. It's kind of starting to take shape. I had this done in my mind, and it's kind of neat to see the image unfolding in front of me. So anyway, it's tight here. There's a little gap there. So now this gap is gone. That was 15 thousandths, and it's preloaded a little bit here. Just to make this tighter, I may order some 3/4 inch, like 1 to 5 thousandths shims, just to put a shim in there and see if that draws that just a little tighter. But for right now, I'm going to get started on this one and then see about tying them together. This is the old AC welder I've been using, so I really can't get super awesome welds like you would with a DC welder. But anyway, this is number 2. See, that's the first one. I just showed you that one, and now I've finished up this one. And these things, I know it doesn't look like there's any weld in here, but if you remember, this whole thing was pretty much hollowed out, and I've now filled all of this with weld. So I think that's going to be really structural. I didn't want to get any weld in here because I didn't want to interrupt this machine face that I worked so hard to make. I know it doesn't look like it, but I've got 5 1/8 inch 7018 rods in this metal right here. So that sucker has used up a lot of rod. This one too, so 10 rods altogether it took me to weld these up. And yes, I did use them up pretty darn good. 5 rods, it's a lot of metal there. So anyways, now you can kind of see how this works. Very happy with these guys. It took me probably 6 hours to make these 2. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's a lot going on here, but there's a lot of machining involved in making these. I just wanted to show you this, guys. This pin here where it goes into the old bell housing is not going to bottom out before this touches. Alright, so I just got this welded into place. That was a little tricky because I didn't want to squeeze that together when I welded the backside. But anyway, there it is. I think that's going to really tie that together well. That's a piece of 3/8. I think time to get some paint on this sucker. I just wanted to take a moment, guys, and show you the finished product here and how it fits. So I've got a lot of time invested in this, probably close to 15 hours. Each of these pins is machined to fit inside these bell housing holes. And no, these are not the same. They're 3/4, but they're very sloppy 3/4. So I had to make these pins extremely tight to fit in there, because that's kind of part of the strength here for this mount. And then these, I machined these bushings to be extremely tight for a 3/4 inch bolt. This is a grade 8, 4.5 inch, and that is going to be just about ideal. So let me show you how this fits, guys. I've got a lot of time and thinking and engineering this bracket, and look at that, it just fits perfectly. So now if I want to take this out and put shims under here to make that grab the bell housing just a little bit more, I can very easily just come in here, slide this off, put my shims on, and then put it right back on. And I'm just tickled the way this thing works. I mean, it took a lot of patience, guys. I'm no machinist by any means, but it takes a long time to do this kind of stuff. But in my mind, this is what I came up with, and this is how I'm going to tie the engine to the bell housing of the tractor. Okay, check it out, guys. I got this all painted. That kind of turned out nice, I think. So anyway, now that I got this painted, it's time to put this thing on, probably for the final time. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've got some shim material here. They're calling them arbor shims. Basically, they're 3/4 inch, but these ones are 1/1000th of an inch, very thin, and these ones are 5/1000ths of an inch. So to start off this, I'm going to put this in without any shims, just to kind of put a feeler gauge, like a 2/1000 feeler gauge in there, just to see if there's any space. We'll go from there. Okay, so if you guys will remember, I did start this with 15/1000ths of an inch. So there is 15/1000ths of a squish here, and as you can see, I can't even start that 2/1000 feeler gauge in there. So there could be a little bit more shim here so that it'll draw this bell housing tighter. Let's go ahead and try. I've got some 5/1000 shims here that I've cut, because these pins are slightly bigger than a 3/4 inch shim. So anyway, I've cut these just to see if I can make the difference, and we'll go from there. Here and here, and we will see if that makes a difference. So these bolts are right around 100 foot-pounds, not the final torque, but I just wanted to show that I can now get a 2/1000 feeler gauge in the bottom, but it stops about halfway up. So what's happening now is that I've got 5/1000 of a shim in there, and it's squishing up here, but it's open on the bottom here. So that tells me that that was too much. So instead of 1 5/1000 shim, I've got 1, 2, 3 1/1000 shims. And these are extremely thin, guys, so it's not like we're dealing with a lot. I'm going to try that, both sides, see what that brings. So I don't love cutting these shims, but that was the only way to make these shims fit on here, because I made this an interference fit with the bell housing. These were slightly bigger than the 3/4. So as you can see, there's just a little gap there. So it is what it is. It's not like these are bolts and they're turning and twisting, otherwise it would destroy those. So I think it'll be fine. All right, so I've got that together, tighten the bolts down, and as you can see, I've got my 2/1000 feeler. I can just about start it, but it won't slide in. So I am thinking we've got the perfect torque here, because there still is a gap there, a very, very little one. And we've got preload here, a tremendous amount of preload here. So I'm thinking that it's touching here, there's a slight gap there. If I torque that down to the final torque, I think that's going to be just about perfect. And that's going to pull that just as tight as can be. Both sides are that same way. Pretty excited. I think that's just about right. So with the 3/1000 in there, I cannot even start this feeler gauge. It just barely wants to start on the bottom. So it's tight on the top and it's tight most of the way. So that is leaving a little squish here. I've tried off camera putting in another 1/1000 shim, and it brought this out to where I could put the 2/1000 in there, like almost halfway up. So I feel like we are at a perfect tension, and I'm going to call that upper mount done. When it comes to the clutch on this, as you can see, we've got this component that pushes up against the clutch. So you pull this back and it pushes the throw bearing into the back of those clutch fingers. And then you've got this clutch pedal, which I'm going to hold that up with some vice grips so I can get in here and put this together. I had to heat this up with a torch. This is how far I had to move this thing, just so that we can get realigned. We've got this vice gripped up out of the way. Now we can pretty much just, it's going to be a little bit of a pain in the butt to do. But if we can get this right there and that right there, somehow we can do this with one hand. Aha! Now, before I let go of that, I want to see what kind of... So we've got quite a bit of free play there. This is the first time I've pushed this clutch. Ooh, sounds good. Nothing binding as of yet. So anyway, we got to do tighten this thing up a little bit and readjust it. Sorry about my shadow here, guys, but I'm working with my outdoor recording studio here. As you can see, we've got just about the right amount of free play, and the pressure to push that clutch pedal doesn't really feel like it's that much more than it was originally. So I'd say that's a win. I'll leave that just about like that. Maybe I'll get another return spring on the outside here so that it's all the way up here. And I think that's going to be good. Until we get it running, we can adjust it later. So I'm going to call that good for right now. And I'm going to leave that cotter pin long just in case. I might need some adjusting. But other than that, got the motor mount ready, got that ready. We're just about ready to start. Got this supported still in the front. Just about ready to start taking this motor mount off the front and looking at what it's going to take to get the front casting for the axle on this Tratter. Alright, so now that I've got the top motor mount in place, these bolts are pretty tight, and I've got this thing up here holding the front of the engine up, I can finally take this front block right here, and I'm going to put it underneath the engine oil pan. But this block here is going to be what holds up the majority of this engine weight. I wanted to wait to do this because I didn't trust this being unbolted without anything there, and I had the worst feeling that I would hear a big crack if I let down the front of this engine with a block, take the blocks out of there, and I'd hate to have to crack this bell housing because I was impatient. So anyway, I gotta get that big bracket right here off the engine so that I can work on the front of the engine. So this thing here, this is the big cast iron piece that's gonna go on there. So I'll show you guys what I'm gonna do to move these blocks around. Alright, so engine is supported in the middle, which is more ideal so that there's not as much leverage wanting to rock it like that on the bolts for the bell housing. And the engine is still supported with the transmission and everything right there. So we've still got 2 points of contact. This sucker is really secure. We've still got this chain right here picking up on the front, just so that nothing goes south until we get the front on this, the cast iron piece. I'm going to then make some frame brackets to stiffen this whole thing, and only then will I be happy with leaving this unsupported in the middle. I don't want to have any breakages beforehand. I've come too far to have a potential crack either in here or one of these bolts in the bell housing let go, or one of these things, the webs crack or something. I don't want to have that happen. I've got way too much money invested at this point. So That's why I'm being a little careful. Now the engine is supported by the oil pan and by the transmission right here. So now and only now do I feel good about taking off this big bracket. So, got that front bracket off, and as you can see, I've got to do some more cleaning now. So I'm going to get this thing scraped and degreased, but that's basically where the front of the tractor is going to bolt to. So we'll get this thing cleaned up. And also, one thing we might have to address is this timing indicator. That might have to be removed. I don't know if that's going to fit in the tractor, or we're just going to do some clearancing on the tractor, the bracket itself that bolts right here. So we will see. Let's get this cleaned up. All right, so here we are. This is the cast iron front end of the tractor. Cast steel, probably, maybe not cast iron, but anyway, this stuff in here is useless as far as this swap goes. So all of this is gonna have to come out. Pretty simple. There's a pin here with the, underneath there's a cotter, this center bushing, and then there's another pin here. This whole thing come right out of there. That's gonna be junk. I'm not gonna be using the center pivot steering anymore. There's just not enough room with this big old balancer on the front of the engine. So I'll get that stripped down and show you what it looks like. It's kind of a shame I won't be using this, because this really is an awesome steering cylinder and it doesn't leak or anything. I never had an issue with this. Here's a better view. Cotter pin. There is, where to go? Under here. Where are you? Now it's gonna make me a liar. No, so that one bolt in the center there is pretty much the only thing that's gonna be removed. Plus that pin there. So, guts are all out of this. We'll show you though, just real quick, what it looks like on the ground. That kind of just swings around. And this pivot here is where the steering tie rod, or drag link I guess you'd call it, pushes, and then this thing extends the ram and shortens the ram. Pretty simple setup. Now I want to show this just because someone out there may be trying to fix one of these tractors. That's a better view of that groove right there. So you can see here, that lines right up. That bolt goes in. So here we can see the first problem. This is the face where that will mount, that big cast piece will mount. This oil pan sticks way out here. That's going to be a problem. This is the original Ford tractor oil pan. Here you can see the face where that mounts. Then the oil pan cuts in and then back to this brace where it will mount to the front end. We don't have that on our Ford engine. So back to the Ford 7.8. We also have these holes here that would have had the oil pan bolts that are not being used. So one solution, which I really don't like the sound of, would be to go get like a 9600 oil pan for, you know, Ford 9600, the farm tractor. That will bolt on, but then I'm going to have to change all of the pickup and everything underneath for the oil pan. Plus the Ford, this 9600 doesn't have as big of a capacity as this oil pan. And this has a better oil pump and more capacity. So I don't really want to do that. So the other option is going to be, I'm going to have to cut the webbing out of the front support here, and I'll show you that. Actually, this webbing right here for that to fit over the oil pan. But that's a lot of metal, and that's adding a lot of strength to this piece right there. So I'm then going to have to add permanent bracing from the front to the back, and it's looking like that might be our only option. Also, I'm going to have to drill a hole here, I think somewhere in here for this hole. Otherwise these holes all fit. So just a few things that are going to stand in my way. I'll show you guys some more. So you can see here I'm dangling this thing in front of the engine, like where it's supposed to be. And we have maybe 1.5 inches of gap here still. And as you can see right there, that whole centerpiece is going to have to be cut out in order for this to slide in and up. However, on the plus side of things, look how much room that balancer has. I was thinking that was going to be the tight spot. Turns out to not be the case. However, one more thing. This bolt looks like it's going to line up here, but I'm going to have to re-drill a bolt here. So I'm going to cut this webbing so that I can get this up high enough. But the first thing I'm going to have to do is to cut this brace here, which is really going to weaken that casting. It'd be nice if I didn't have to do that, but short of replacing the oil pan, I don't think there's anything that I can do about it. And I don't really want to replace the oil pan, guys. Alright, so we're getting ready to cut this brace. And I'm going to use my big bandsaw to do that. I'm going to try to get this as square and straight as I can so it'll minimize grinding. But we'll see what happens. So I've got that brace cut out of there, and as you can see, that's like 3/4 inch thick at the webbing. But in the middle here, it kind of necked down. It was still quite a lot of metal. Had some issues with the blade. The blade snapped on me down here. So anyway, let's try this back on the tractor and see if we need to take any more bites. I did have to grind this one, or cut that one off. We're gonna put it on there and see what else we gotta do. All right, I had to do some more clearancing here, and that's all right because this hole is not going to be used. There's going to be another hole slightly below it. I had to cut this radius, but so far this is fine. It's not really in the way. Go ahead and test fit this again. All right, so here we are, dangling the front end off the tractor again, and it looks like that little bump has to come off. Now we're a little better as far as clearance goes, but I think it's time for this bracket for the alternator to come off. All right, so this time around, we did manage to get this engine bolt in. Doesn't really line up perfectly, but I don't think we need to cut any more on this side. I don't know if you can see this or not. I'm gonna try my best. As you can see, the bolt is through, but this still needs to come up like a good 3/8 of an inch, so we need to clearance some more up on top. All right, so to make room for the new bolt hole, I had to cut this in with the Sawzall because my bandsaw wouldn't reach, and I drilled a bunch of holes here. I'm going to just break that ear off, then I can grind that and shape it. I tried using a torch to cut this. It didn't work. See how it's kind of like frosty looking? It's kind of neat. So here's a quick update. I'm getting this thing all ground down pretty good. I did have to take a big chunk out of this so that I could have room to, this is my pile of removed bits, so I can have room to ever change a belt if I need. And as you can see here, I've got this flat ready for the hole to be drilled. I don't know where it's going to be yet, so let's get this mounted back up, get some bolts on it, see how it fits. Well guys, check it out. The front axle support is bolted on. As you can see there, those bolts fit in perfectly. I've got plenty of clearance for a belt if I ever need to change that. The only thing is, I might have to move my radiator ahead because that balancer is like right in the way of that. We've got this bolt in there. Now all I've got to do is drill this one. This one hole is going to be tricky though. As you can see, we've got the spot prepped for the hole, and we are making progress. Just take a minute to look at that. This tractor is coming together. That's kind of the last big final piece that needs to go together to make this thing happen. All right, so this is my solution to all my problems right here, guys. Ugh. I made myself a center punch. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my new center punch, put it in here, strike that with a hammer, and I will make a pretty darn perfect center hole. Alright, so there's my little mark. Now I can drill that out. Alright, so we've got that hole drilled. It fits in there nice. Hopefully whenever we bolt this up, it'll be just perfect. I used this bad girl, 1/2-inch drill, and I'm hoping I don't have to do any grinding, but I thought I marked that out pretty well. We'll see. There we go. So there. Didn't take much. I had to do a little bit of grinding on the inside of that, just because I'm not perfect. And there we go. All 4 bolts are in. I can now do a few more little things and bolt this on for good. So I got a splash of paint where it counts. Didn't paint the whole thing, of course, but I wanted to paint where I could not get after this was bolted on. I did grind these down more, these little ears. That way I can take the oil pan out if I need to, without having to take the front end off. So we are getting ready to mount this thing for the what I'm going to call the final time. I may have to take it off depending on what I'm going to do with this, but I need to start fabricating frame rails that go down the side of this tractor. So we're going to bolt this on for good. So here we are, guys. This is the first piece of the puzzle for these frame braces. This is 5/8 thick, 6 inches wide, 20 foot long. I just got this. I've also got some 3/8 angle and some 4-inch, 1/2-inch. Let's get this thing in the shop. All right, guys, so I'm getting a little burnt out on this project. I needed some inspiration, so while I was looking at this thing like I normally do, I'll just stand and look at this project and imagine in my head what it's going to turn out like. That only gets you so far. So what I did was I went and I took the grill shell and I bolted that back up here just to kind of get some inspiration, and also to see kind of how the hood's going to fit around this big old turbo. And on the other side we've got some issues like this fuel filter housing that sticks out. So I'm just trying to figure everything out, and this kind of brought a lot of inspiration to me by having this hood on here. So anyway, I went ahead and I made this template. This is what I'm going to go ahead and give to the steel guys. I'm going to take this big 6-inch material, 5/8 thick, and that's going to be like on end, and that's going to go from here, and it's going to follow. They're going to bend this metal to follow around these oil filters. I know it's going to lose structure anytime you bend metal, but that's why I went with, 5/8 of an inch thick. It's a little overkill. So anyway, a couple other things, guys. One thing I could do would be to remove this oil cooler housing, and I could relocate the oil filter somewhere else. But I like the idea of having lower temperature oil on this tractor. So I'm going to leave that there. I'm just going to make these frame rails to help stiffen everything, because we don't have that big oil pan that used to connect the front to the rear. So on this side over here, I'm going to use this on the other side as well. So this is the pattern on the other side. So this is the same pattern as what we just saw on the driver's side, for lack of a better term. So there's a big gap here, but what I was thinking is this fuel filter housing is held on there with these 2 bolts, and it looks like the studs, this housing can move. I'm going to take this coolant filter and bolt it right here. And I'm going to take this filter housing and bolt it here. So I'll have fuel filters and oil filter all within close proximity to each other. Now, I think that'll work really well. Plus, it'll give a meaning to this frame rail sticking out. that far. Because over here it's got the big oil cooler that makes it look like it needs a frame rail. But over here I was tempted just to make this straight as I can. So anyway, I'll show you more. So, just got back from the steel shop, and look what I have here. They bend up these big giant chunks, 5/8 plate. This is 5/8 of an inch thick by 6 inches wide. So I couldn't have done this myself, guys, so I did have to hire this done. But check it out. Those are going to be my new frame rails. So the steel shop has a 200-ton press. And even with that 200-ton press, they had to heat this up with a torch in order to bend it. I mean, they did a very good job. Look how straight that is, too. I mean, that was difficult to bend just because of its sheer thickness. But, very nice. So on edge here, you can kind of see this line is pretty much right on the template. This is like 1/4 of an inch too wide, but not a big deal. It's not like this fits in anything. This was just a blank that I had, so this is going to be on the outside of the tractor. And I think they did a good job. I mean, it's incredibly hard to bend this thick material, and you only have one shot to do it. So if I had to sacrifice another 6-foot length, I could have had them redo this, but they're both the same. You know, I've checked them both. They're both about 1/4 of an inch out right there. Not the end of the world. So let me go show you what they look like on the tractor, because then I've got to do a bunch of measuring for the bolt holes, which are going to be in here somewhere. So I just set that frame rail up there with some jack stands just to kind of see how it would look. And I am very happy that I went and had this bent. That just looks so awesome. And I'm glad I went with the thickness that I went with, because it looks so bold there. Looks really good, because you're going to see that on the outside of the tractor. That's going to be kind of like a statement. You know, this is awesome, and it looks pretty darn sharp. I've got it pretty darn level too for what it is. It kind of lines up right with the bottom of the block, just about perfect. See, there's plenty of clearance for the oil filters. You can still get the oil filters out. There's plenty of clearance everywhere. See, the oil filters are right there. You can get those out, no problem. Nothing has been hidden or otherwise hurt. All right, so I've only got one chance at doing this. So I've already gone ahead and used my square. We've got that pretty much right where it's got to be. And then I've got this measured at exactly 4 inches, because that's what that is on the tractor. I've already gone ahead and drilled just a small pilot hole. Now let's drill those holes as big as they got to be. All right, just got this drill press. Might as well use this as a good chance to see how it works. This is one of those Vevors, whatever it is, mag drills, and I've got a 3/4 inch annular cutter in this thing. So let's go ahead and see how accurate this is, just so you guys can see how fast these drill presses are, because it really is awesome. The reason it keeps bogging down like that is because this has a load sense on it. It's kind of weird, but it does a good job. There it is. That just drilled through 5/8 of steel in, what do we got here? A little over a minute. And as you can see, the hole that we're left with is perfect. So I have to be spot on with my measurements. Worst case scenario, I'll just have to do a little bit of grinding, or I'll just get the next size up cutter, which I think is 13/16. All right, so I've got these 2 bolts in. Those fit pretty darn nice. Now all I've got to do is get these 2 bolts. Those are going to be tricky because This was pretty much just, you gotta get it perfectly up and down. I gotta get these ones width-wise and height perfect. So I'll get it. Just, I'm happy. This is looking good, and I'm happy it's going so smooth so far. All right, so I got those 2 holes drilled. That was exactly 11 1/4 inch from this one. 4 inches on center. So very happy with that. Now, as you can see, this thing is just perfectly level with the engine block. I don't know if you can see the engine block or the oil pan underneath, but this thing is nice and flat. I've got this frame rail all bolted on, ready to go. What it looks like, I think there's plenty of room. If I want to move these fuel filters down in here, move that ahead, and I've got this 4 inch, 1/2 inch that's going to go right in here. I'm thinking this is looking pretty sharp, guys. I've got a lot of work done behind the scenes here. I've got this material bolted on, just kind of getting ready for some templating. This is 3/8 thick by 2.5 inches. That's some pretty beefy stuff. I couldn't find any 1/2 inch thick with a smaller webbing, because this thing is only, 2.5 inches wide, so this is going to be perfect. And on this side, I haven't bolted on the piece yet, but I have that. And then these pieces are ready, pretty much ready, to get a template for the piece of vertical that's going to go on there. It's going to tie that all together. I'm working on the rear of these frame supports, and this is a piece of 1/2 inch, 4 inches wide. I made these pieces of angle iron 4.5 inches wide, just because I wanted to use the whole piece of the, I guess you'd call it the bolster that sticks out. Anyway, what's happening here is that, see, we have stick out on either side, so I don't like that. So what I did, I went ahead and I cut out a piece of 6 inch down to 4.5 inches. This is piping hot because I just cut this out with a torch. So anyway, we're going to use this on there. I'll show you what that looks like. Now, I've already got this one drilled and everything. I haven't welded it, obviously, but I think I might cut this one out at 4.5 inches too, just because I don't like the look of it. And see, I even cut this one at an angle so that it would look good. But little things like that make me not happy if they're not the same on both sides. I just slid this piece of 5/8 in there, and as you can see now, that looks way better. That will really show. So now I've got it so that I can fill this groove with weld. I can fill this groove with weld, and I can then take it off and I can weld the backside too. So that's going to make me very happy. And I'm also going to cut this. I think I might leave this long, just for now. Weld the back side of it. But I think I'm going to leave this long for future frame use. So anyway, plus this is 1/2 inch. This is 5/8. That's going to be a lot thicker. Not that I necessarily need the strength there, but that's what I did. And I've got a new piece on this side, so that looks much more suitable, at least in my opinion. We've also got a nice open root here so that we can fill that with weld. So I'm happy with that. Looks a lot better, I think. Now there are some, holidays here. I'm not the best torch user in the world. I can cut a pretty good seam, but I don't know, I'm not perfect. So I ground that up best I could, and I think that'll look all right. Okay, so I've got the first piece of the puzzle here welded together. Don't make fun of my welds too badly, guys, because this is the only thing I've got to weld this thicker stuff with. This is a 220, 225 amp, but this is an AC welder. This doesn't weld DC. So I'm welding with 7018 I mean, it's not terrible for what it is, but... So anyway, I've got about a dozen rods in here. 1/8 inch 7018 rods. And as you can see, I've got quite a bit of metal here. I've probably got 4 passes and then 1 wide, big cover pass there to kind of cover all the individual passes. So there that is, not perfect, but I'm not really aiming to be perfect here, guys. I just want something that's really beefy, and I think that'll be exactly what I need. Just wanted to show you guys, this is the root pass I just laid. Even though it's not the prettiest weld, it's definitely a structurally sound weld. I'm just gonna do probably 3 or 4 more passes, build that up. Obviously do the bottom, and I'll take this whole thing off and I'll do the back sides, and I believe this side will be done. All right, so there's the first cover pass over the root. Not super pretty, but I'm getting better with this thing. It takes a while to get used to an AC welder, but I really need to get a big MIG welder so I can do this stuff. All right, there's another one that's done. This is off the tractor now, flipped upside down. And I just finished up that one. There's like 4 passes on that. Gonna have to flip it around again and get the backside and la-di-da-di-da. All right, got this one all done. Sorry about that shadow. I'm not bringing this one up quite as high just because, I don't know, I think it kind of looks nice the way it is. And just that right there was like 5 welding rods. So now I've just got to do this side right here. So I gotta flip this thing again. All right, so I felt as though this needed reinforcement. So I got some 5/8 inch material and I made some gussets. That way it kind of ties in this flange to this bulk. All right, so I finished welding this and I had to install it on the tractor extremely fast because I noticed that this was starting to bend a little bit. I did not think that welding this heavy 5/8 would bend, but as you can see, there is quite a bit of deflection there. So because I was doing welding on the back here, it basically just curled it in. And so I saw that as I was welding this one right here on the back, and this is still like really, really hot. While it was very hot, I went ahead and I bolted this up, and this, you know, kind of bent down a little bit, but I wanted to do that while it was hot because there's no way I'm gonna be able to bend this thing now that it's bent, even while it's hot. But I wanted it to bolt onto the tractor so that it had the best chance of fitting again. So anyway, that's still very hot. I'm gonna have to cut that. I was gonna leave that long for a frame piece, but I don't know what I'm gonna do now because that's bent in. It doesn't really look all that great. Maybe you can't see it that well from the camera, but that's solid material too, guys, to bend like that. But that welding, I'll tell you, that heat is a powerful thing. So anyway, there's one frame rail pretty much welded out. As I showed you there, I did weld those braces in there, and I'm glad I did. But I think I might also weld one up on there. It might not need it. But I wanted that on there just for a little bit of extra strength, and I'm glad I did that. So anyway, this has taken a long time. I've got a whole box of welding rods in this thing. So these 2 gussets were feeling kind of lonely. So I went ahead and gave them another gusset friend. That'll tie that whole top piece together. And I can only do one because I've got this thing right here that's gonna be in the way. So I feel like that's gonna be pretty darn strong. All right, so I just got some primer on this thing just to keep it from rusting up overnight. I think that looks pretty darn sharp for what it is. I'm happy with the way that turned out. Even if that bent just a little bit, yeah, that's minor. I think it's kind of ridiculous to wrestle around by yourself. It's doable. As long as I get this thing, you don't drop bolts. As long as I get this thing on the jack stands, it usually does pretty good. I've had this thing off a bunch of times now. Alright, so I believe this side is done for the most part, as far as mounting it goes. I'm still obviously having to do something up here with this frame section. Not quite sure what's going to happen on the front yet. However, I've got this steering arm, so there's plenty of clearance. That's as far as it goes. See, the steering wheel's locked right there. That's as far as it goes, so that tie rod or that drag link should stick out. Worst case scenario, I could heat this and bend this out just a little if I had to. But other than that, very happy with the way these frame rails turned out. I guess it was just a rookie move. I should have welded a big piece of metal to the back so that didn't warp when I was welding it. But anyway, live and learn. Alright, this is the back side of the motor mount, or whatever you want to call this support brace. And I've learned from my last time where all the warpage happened. So I'm going to weld this backing plate here, and then I'm going to weld a gusset in here, and that should take care of this plate. And then I'm going to weld something like this on this plate on edge, so that if I get any warpage, I'm hoping that this piece of 5/8 will stop that from warping. Then I can just grind off that piece, and it should be just as good as can be. So I've got this all gusseted in, and I put this backing plate on there thinking it was going to be temporary, but you know, I kind of like that. I might just leave that on there as a permanent thing. That'll add a lot of strength to this bracket. Not that it really needs it, but it'll have it. So on the outside, this is just a normal bracket. See, normal. But on the back side, it's a highly gusseted, super strong bracket in disguise. All right, so here we are, another beautiful fall morning. I have just got my first root laid in and my first cover pass, and I've got my first overhead. Don't judge too badly. It's not the prettiest thing in the world, but that'll keep it from lifting. So I'm going to try to let this cool a little bit more, hoping that it won't warp this plate, and I'll show you more. This one is all done. I've got, I don't know, 3 cover passes on that. I'm going to now take this whole piece off, turn it around 180, weld the bottom, and then finish welding this thing out. I always like welding with 7018 just because it's so satisfying to watch the slag. I mean, it's neat. So anyway, that pretty much concludes the welding for that joint. So as is tradition, the very last weld is always the best one. And you know, there it is. There's a very nice root pass, if I do say so myself. And we're getting a lot of noises back here, but so far nothing has warped. So I'm going to let this cool down before I do the next 3. All right, so just got that ground off, and as you can see, it's still warped a little bit. I don't know what I did wrong. Maybe I just used too much heat. Whatever the case is, we're done. So no more welding for a while. We're gonna go ahead and finish by cutting this, sanding it all up, giving it some primer, putting it back on the tractor. There we are. Got some John Deere buff primer on there, and it's looking good, I think. This is the back side, obviously. Check it out. That frame rail is on there. Now, you can still see where this bent just a little bit. Not sure what I could have done different to avoid that, but it fits on there. It's a little hard to get on there. You kind of got to put like the top bolts on, tighten them down so you can do the bottom ones. But what do? I've got a tremendous amount of work involved in this thing, both sides. I don't think it looks that bad, you know, for what it is. Sorry about the glare, guys. So that's done. Now I've got to figure out the front. Got to figure out what I'm going to do with this stuff. Am I going to cut the frame rails? Am I going to make something with the frame rails? But I've got this pretty much done. So now I'm not worried about the structure of the thing anymore, like I was. I can probably undo that chain right there and that binder, and I can ease my mind of worry, because I don't want this thing to break in half because there's so much extra weight and so much extra length. So between these bell housing bolts and this pretty rugged frame, I think I'm pretty happy. So here's the front axle, guys. I want to show you something. From here to there, it's about 17 inches, give or take. You know, it's just real rough. So the way that axle goes on this tractor, or it used to go, I should say, would put that somewhere in the center of that oil pan. That's not going to work. Flip that around so that the brace is on the front. It's going to look a little tacky, but short of cutting up this oil pan, which I don't think will do any good because then there's still nothing to hold that brace, I don't think there's anything else we can really do. This is the original Ford motor, and as you can see, there's this nice cutout in the oil pan that axle brace would have fit in. And then there is provisions for the pin in the center of that. So obviously we were missing this piece, so we're gonna have to make something work to flip them around. See, all that is just a dust cover. There's a bushing right here, but it's only halfway through this axle support. I'm not sure why they terminated that and didn't go a whole way through. So this is obviously wore out, not very tight at all. Over on this side, as you can see, maybe you can't, let me get some light in there. Yeah, there you can see that bushing, how it stopped and how it was rubbing on the unmachined surface. But right there you can see a rib. So obviously the weight of the tractor is going to be on this portion. So what I can do is maybe I'll machine a bushing on the lathe that I can press in there, because as you can see there's quite a gap there. And I could probably machine a bushing and just press that in. We'll call it a day. We'll move on with this project. So to fix this issue with the front end, here's the plug that I pounded out of the end. So this outer diameter, call it 2.07, right? A little over 2 inches. 2.04. I was down at CarQuest and I stumbled upon this exhaust pipe. Now check this out. That's like 2.01. Maybe a little under 2 in some places. And the ID is basically, I don't know if you can see that, 1.87. So that's like the perfect size. Well, actually it's like 1.9. Anyway, this is like the perfect size for a bushing. I don't even have to put it on my machine to change it down to a size. So check this out. Here's the pin. Look at that. That's like the perfect bushing. Even the factory bushings aren't that tight. Now we can just come in here and deburr this whole thing. This is actually, I've never machined exhaust pipe before. It's just like any other mild steel. So here's my bushing, guys. Let's go see if it fits. I've got a nice beveled edge there, so hopefully it'll press in without any issues. So I found some old stock I had kicking around. It's got a big weld on it. Anyway, looks to be the perfect seal driver. So I just had to reface this quick, and now I should be able to go press this in the axle. So check this out. Got a little rusty overnight, but I mean, this is like a match made in heaven. Now I'm going to put this welded line, well, I guess there's two welded lines. So anyway, I'll put the clean surface down where the thrust is going to be. Anyway, look how tight that is. It gets to about right there. I think that'll drive in just perfect. Cool. So I didn't get that whole thing on video because I took a picture instead of recording, so for whatever reason I didn't get that. But that thing is all pressed in there, guys, and I am very pleased with the way that fits. And if I ever want to take that out, it's going to be relatively easy. All you got to do is just chisel in, dent it, and that'll roll right in. So I mean, I just got to trim this now. We'll have a bushing. How easy is that? Now I do want to show, I don't know if it shows up on camera, but this bushing is actually tighter than the original bushing. And on the top where there's no wear, that show up, it's a very true dimension. On the bottom here, as you know, where it's wore, because all the weight is on this piece right here, not on the top, that's a really tight fit. So who would have thought a part store exhaust pipe would make a perfect bushing for that pin right there. From this side you can see a lot better how that new shim stands proud of the old shim, but on the top it's just about flush. So that's almost the same exact inner dimension as the original shim. So here we can see also from this side, there's the loose bushing, and then there's the tight bushing. So how cool is that? You know how happy that makes me. Alright, so there's a finished project. I got a little carried away with the grinder there, but it's not going to hurt a thing. So as you can see here now, got a really nice tight fit for that pin. So there it is, guys. The front end is just kind of hanging there with the bushing. The pin pushes through right here. As you can see, that's just kind of sitting there. And I wanted to show you guys too. Watch this. That's all the slop there is on that whole thing. Look how far that pin comes through. It's actually touching, I don't know if you can see that, it's actually touching the old bushing. So that's pretty cool. As you can see, there's always going to be a little bit of a gap there because the thrust was always handled here on this bracket. Even originally, with this pin right here, there was this big bronze or brass washer that acted on the back, because you got to figure this whole thing was pushing back as the tractor was driving. So this is going to have to go on the front here, and that big bracket is going to have to handle all of the stress of the axle. This big pin here just handles the weight of the tractor. And just something to note, if you guys have one of these tractors, the grease fitting that's right here does not grease the axle, okay? It greases the steering down here. So I thought this greased the axle, and I was just going to see if that was plugged up or anything, but in reality, grease started coming out of the bottom of this hole here for the steering rack. While I've got the lathe on and going, I figured I would build this. I'll show you what this does in just a minute. Basically, it's a chunk of aluminum, 3/8 of an inch thick, drilled and tapped, 1/4 by 28 to accept a standard grease fitting. I'll probably end up red Loctiting that on. Let me show you what this is for. So here we have the front axle, and as you can see, this is where I pressed that bushing in. This is going to be the back side, and because this never had any grease fittings or anything like that, I figured I'd make one. So this is going to go on here, and I'm going to drill and tap this with 3 bolts, and then I'll probably, I don't know if I'll put some silicone on the back of this. So anyway, that's going to be my grease fitting so that I can grease this trunnion right here. So for those of you who don't know, this axle is going to be backwards because this is where the pin used to go in from this side. Okay, now the pin's going to go in from this side. So if you didn't see that, I did press in a new bushing, basically a piece of exhaust pipe on the bottom here. And then there's the original bushing here. So this is the original cap that went in on this side. So because there's a bushing on this side, this does not fit. Would have been cool to use this, but it doesn't work. So I want to make a new cap but one that has a grease fitting in it. So I've gone ahead and made this chunk of aluminum, and then I drilled and tapped 3 holes in this big chunk of center pivot. I've got way too much time invested in this, more than I care to admit. Most of the morning, in fact. But this bushing is hardened, and this is just regular, probably cold rolled steel, or maybe even forged, I'm not sure. But anyway, the hardened bushing did not like being drilled and tapped. So I broke off one tap. Luckily I was able to get it out, and I used a bottoming tap, and I was able to do, it took forever. So anyway, what I'm going to do, put this on there, have a grease fitting. That way I can keep grease in here, so that this is just a piece of exhaust pipe. That's relatively soft compared to this old bushing, but that was the only thing I could find to make this work. So anyway, grease in here will make a big difference. And as far as grease down here, I'm just gonna have to take the pin out maybe once a year, put a little grease in there, and then put the pin back in. Because I don't want to drill a hole through here for a grease fitting. I guess I could, but I don't really want to. So anyway, most of the stress is gonna be right here, with the weight of the tractor. It's gonna be sitting right here on this pin. This is gonna do a lot of, it's gonna have a lot of stress there too, but not as much as here. So anyway, no grease fitting, grease fitting. All right, so check this out. For the front axle, this thing right here is an oddball looking piece, but this is a front axle support for an old Ford 6000, you know, like the old Commanders. The only thing is, this is an inch pin. My pin on the Ford 5000 requires a 1.25" pin. So what I've got in mind is, if I can take, well, basically, if I can take this, machine that hole out to an 1.25", I can use this as a bracket. See, that fits sideways perfectly. I can use this as a bracket to support the axle. So here we have the front axle bracket. I took the pin out, that's an inch pin. And it's almost like a perfect fit. The only thing is, of course, we've got an inch pin, we've got an 1.25" hole. So I might even make a bushing on the lathe to press in there so that I can use the inch pin, quite frankly, just because I think that would be easier than machining this to accept the pin. So that's kind of cool. I mean, it looks like that would be a relatively straightforward thing for something that would be easy to make. Because I was envisioning making this big bracket, you know, tying it into here, doing all kinds of stuff, machining bushings on the lathe so I can weld. For 90 bucks, I think it was, I've got this thing, and it's pretty much all ready to go. And this is what held the axle on a Ford 6000, which had the same exact axle saddle as this. They just had obviously a smaller hole. So anyway, I might try that, make a bushing on the lathe, press it in, and see what that can get us. So I've got a piece of 1.25" solid round, and look how that, I don't even think I'm gonna have to machine the outer diameter. I think that'll press right in. It's just about perfect. So that's just like 3 to 4 thousandths under an inch. So I'll make that just as tight as I can. It's a beautiful thing. All right, so pretty much the boring is done. Check this out. Wow. I don't know if it needs to be that tight, but I would rather have it tight than loose. If I can find my grooving tool, I'm going to put a little groove on the inside so that way oil can kind of be trapped in there, you know, so it might help the longevity of this. So part of my thought process behind making this bushing so tight is that, as you can see here in the middle, this pin is worn. And my idea is that if that's as tight as can be on this unwore shoulder of the pin, then this will be a lot more loose. Okay, so you can see in there there's a slight groove. It's right around like 5/1000 of an inch, 5/1000 of an inch deep. Doesn't need to be super deep, just needs to be enough to hold a film of oil or grease. So I took this opportunity to make a little driver so that I can put that in there, and it will drive that straight as it can go, and it won't flare this bushing. So let's go put this in the tractor now. We will find out here. Wow, that's awesome. Okay, so here's the pin. I don't know why it's wow. So anyway, that did compress just a little bit when I drove that in there, so I should have made a little more clearance there, but in the middle where it's worn, it's got plenty of free play. So I don't have the shims with me, but this basically just fits up on there like that. It's very nice. Awesome. So this axle bracket here, the early Ford 6000s were actually red, and I guess they had a lot of issues with them and they got recalled, or the customers had an option of getting a new one or having their old one refurbished. So anyway, the ones that got refurbished, from what I've read, were then painted blue as part of the warranty. So the original red here is actually one of the early 6000s that had the issues with the transmissions and the hydraulic systems. So anyway, that was a much bigger tractor than like my 5000 as far as weight, horsepower, everything else. It was one of the first big Fords to have a 6-cylinder diesel. So anyway, this tractor was quite heavy, but they felt that this 1-inch pin was adequate. So I'm fairly confident that this inch pin will also be adequate for my 5000. The other thing is, if you look at the center section of the 6000, it's very close to that of the 5000. I'm convinced that they used a lot of these center sections on the later 1000 series tractors, but just modified the rear radius support. In this case, it's going to be the front because I'm flipping the axle around. So anyway, cool piece of history. I found that on eBay. Good luck finding any more of those things. But you can also find one of the later 4-bolt brackets here from like a 6610. Those you can buy new for like $500. But I got this one for $100. I feel like $100 was my limit. If I had to pay any more, I probably was just going to go make one of my own out of steel. So anyway, cool piece of history. So check this out. Just arrived today. It's big, orange, heavy, and it belongs on a tractor. So let me show you what this thing is. How are we gonna get that out of here without killing ourselves in our back? Before I get too far here, guys, I do want to show you that this sucker weighs 240 pounds. Now, as you can see, there's nothing else underneath there, just a big chunk of weight. So, that's a lot of weight. My back's a little sore, but we're gonna get it in here somewhere so that we can use our crane, put it on the front of this tractor. Let me just explain to you guys what I've got here. This is a weight bracket that came off from a Ford 6610, so the 10 series, or I guess you'd call them the 2 series Ford tractors. This is a 1st generation 1000 series. This is a 2nd generation series weight bracket. However, as you can see, this is yellow. This 6610, I believe, was one of the state mowers that you saw with like the big flail mowers on the side. So anyway, this is a factory weight bracket hanger. As you can see there, it's pretty beefy. And you see we've got this 4-bolt pattern, which just happens to be the same as our 4-bolt pattern here. This front bolster was used for many years on these Ford tractors. This tractor here looks like it was blue at one point. But anyway, this is my idea. Now this is expensive. I had to order this on eBay. Stuff like this is not available in my area. We're not a big farming community up here, guys, so these tractors are kind of few and far between. So I had to get this from Wisconsin, which, hey, it is what it is. The idea behind this is that I'm going to basically put this weight bracket on the front of the tractor, and then that'll give me a big chunk of metal to bolt that bracket to for this front axle. That's the idea. I don't know if it's going to work. This might have been just a big waste of money, but I figured this looks a lot better than having, you know, fabricated metal on the front. This looks, and I've always wanted one of these weight brackets. So it's got some nice pins and lifting points in there. I figured we're going to try this, stick it on there, see what that looks like. We're just kind of shooting in the dark here, guys, but I think this is, from my research that I've done, I think this is gonna work. So here we have this thing dangling precariously from the engine hoist, and I've got these frame rails obviously loosened up. They're just held on there loosely with those bolts in the rear. Let's go ahead and see if we can fit this up. There. I just got these new 3/4 inch grade 8 3-inch long, and I think I just got one there by accident. Oh, that's cool. All right. Big chunk of material. You guys can just start to see now what I kind of envisioned in my mind. The weight bracket's on there. I'm going to now cut these brackets to fit. I'm going to have to obviously pick this up because it's sagging. But this is the big thing right here. So as you can see, we've got a nice big flat material that we can put our bracket against. I might have to build a shim or something that will be seen, but how cool is that? I've always wanted one of these weight brackets because this will fit a suitcase weight right on there just fine, and it fits perfectly with the old style front end, as we can see. There's a little gap there. I'm not quite sure why they designed it like that, but I think it's fine. It kind of fits on there just like that. It uses those 4 bolts. But as you can see, this is kind of my idea. I'm left with a gap there, obviously. Once that's actually held up there, the gap isn't quite so big. But I'm left with like a 2-inch gap, maybe a 2.5-inch gap. And that'll be a lot easier to make a bracket for. Come on, stay there. That'll be a lot easier to make a bracket for that I can bolt to this than it would be to start from scratch with these brackets of 5/8. So I think that looks pretty darn cool. If I can make some kind of bracket, I don't know, maybe I can go down to the machine shop and have them mill me out a big chunk of 2-inch thick with a taper and everything. Not quite sure what I'm going to do there yet. But anyway, that's the idea. As you can see, it sticks in there pretty good, so I don't think it'll, from the side, you really can't see it that bad. It doesn't look that bad. And from this way, yeah, I'm happy with that. So anyway, these pieces are kind of starting to fit together, guys. I'm really excited because I'm starting to get a lot of money tied up in this thing, and I really want to see the wheels on it. So let's keep chugging along. I'm gonna get these frame rails trimmed and go from there. Behind the scenes here, I cut this with a torch and I shaped this. It looks kind of funny, I know, but I'll show you in a minute what this looks like. I think I'm pretty happy, I think, with the way this looks. But anyway, it took a while to get this curve just right. I had to make a template, put that on there, mark it out, cut it. It took forever, but I'm pleased with the way that looks. This is my template here. Basically, I just made a shadow of this on the back of here, marked it out, and voila. So this is what we're left with. And I am very happy with that. There's a nice gap all the way around. In case anything ever moves or expands, it won't hit. This line flows really nice. I was halfway thinking about doing like a little step here, welding on a step, but that's way too much work. So I'm happy with the way that turned out. It actually works out pretty darn slick, I think. That transition is really nice. So I'm happy with that. I think what I'm gonna do now is take this side frame piece off, paint it. Well, prime it first, paint it, put it back on, and then I will be done with the frame sections for a while. I think I don't need to take them off for any other reason. Okay, so here we are on the scale. That piece right there weighs 70, I think that's 73 pounds, 72 pounds, something like that. So, pretty cool. Okay, so sun's going down, as you can see. I got these painted on the back side. I did not paint the outside. As you can see, it's still primer yellow because I figured I'd paint those while they're on the tractor. So this is just about tacked up. I'm gonna go ahead and put these back on the tractor, and it should be done with these frame rails for a while. That is, at least until I have to weld on my steering ram bracket, but that'll come later. There we are, guys. The frame rails are pretty much done, and I'm happy with the way that they look. So this gap right here is just enough so that if anything ever moves, it shouldn't hit. And I don't think it's going to hurt anything even if it does. All the bolts are grade 8. They got nice heavy washers on them. And I'll spray this blue, don't worry about that. I figured I'd wait till I get... I'd wait to get the rest of the thing pretty much together before I spray the outside of this. So, happy with it. Very happy. I think there's been a lot of work to get these frame rails done. As you can see, I'm very happy with the way they look. I don't think you guys realize how much time is involved in fabricating stuff like this. Like, everything is one-off, everything is custom. Like, there's nothing I'm using that's off the shelf, so to speak. So everything I do, I have to kind of do it custom. So this stuff just takes a long time. But, you know, if you take your time and you pay attention to detail and make it look cool, in my opinion, you'll be happier whenever you're done because you did the best job that you possibly could. So anyway, happy with it, guys. I'm very happy and excited to show you guys more. Sorry about all the crunching noise. As you can see, guys, it's fall now. You guys will see this video who knows when, but right now it's October. So, or is it September? I can't remember. The months blend together, guys. But basically what I'm getting at is there'll probably be a whole 6 months or a year involved in this video before you guys see it. So, all right, so you haven't missed much, but I got the axle up underneath the tractor, and here you can see I have the axle pivot bracket right there, and I've got a piece of 5/8 plate just kind of clamped up there, you know, not doing nothing, but we're just kind of getting some ideas. As you can see right here, there's a bigger gap here than there is here. So I'm gonna have to make a bracket to weld to this piece of 5/8 plate, and then I'm going to take and bolt this 5/8 plate right to the bolster. Sorry about the glare here, guys. Not the best of lighting in my studio here today. I've got a really big thick chunk, 1/2 inch thick, 4 inch wide, 2.5 inch tall channel iron I'm going to use. I'm going to take and cut this on the front higher and lower on the back. So I'm going to get some good measurements, cut that, and then what I can do, drill my holes in there and basically make just a really heavy duty mount for that front axle. All right, so I just got done. I cut this with a torch at 3/4 of an inch. and this is 1 1/8". I will now cut this with the bandsaw just because I want a really nice clean cut there. And after I let that cool down, that's almost, I can feel that through my glove. So anyway, I got some nice scrap pieces for a random project. Well, let's keep on going. Fast forwarded a few steps here, got the piece all cleaned up, you know, best I could. And as you can see, it's thicker on one side than it is the other. I'm going ahead and use my mag drill. We have drilled these holes to 5/8 of an inch. Perfect holes. This is going to go on here, like that. Just perfect. And then I'm going to take this and fit it up to the tractor. That way I can kind of use it as a guide so that I can weld this onto the plate. So we've got the weight bracket upside down off the tractor. As you can see, I got a line right here. That is going to be a line for this plate. So basically, I'm going to line this up best I can. I'll get some really good dimensions, you know, from the side, make sure it's right in the middle. And then I'm going to take and get some more dimensions on where I can put 4 holes. So I'm going to drill 4 holes with the annular cutter in this plate, and then I'm going to drill and tap into this solid chunk of cast. So this is effectively going to be just a big bracket. And then I can take this piece. It's high centered because of these bolts, but basically this piece is going to be welded on there, and then from there I can take it back off, finish welding it, all that stuff. So kind of in the design phase right now. I don't really know how this is going to work. I can't see any information available anywhere on how to make this work, so I'm going totally blind and just using my own creativity. So I'll show you more once I get more. I've gone ahead and I've got my bolt pattern laid out. I'm going to go now drill 4 holes. Just wanted to show you guys, this is kind of the way it looks from the back. I wanted to use the same dimension here. So once I finish grinding this down, that should look just about perfect. And once I get the holes drilled here, then I'll have to go get a tap drill and drill for 5/8 by 11 into the cast. So that drill press does really good with this thick plate, and it's extremely accurate. I mean, as accurate as the operator can be, I should say. So anyway, check that out. So here we are, guys. I got the first hole here drilled for my tap bit. So what I did was I just used my annular cutter to line up the hole, or line up the drill press. And then I used just a 1/4 inch drill bit to go first, followed with this drill bit, which is the tap drill for a 5/8 by 11. So anyway, now I can take this drill press off and try to tap this one hole first just to see how it goes. Alright, so I've got the 2 done, threaded and drilled and tapped and everything. I just wanted to kind of show you what I do. So I have the annular cutter in here, and I've got that basically lined up, get the drill press lined up with the hole. So now what I can do is I can change out this cutter for the drill chuck, and I can drill my 1/4 inch hole and it's perfectly centered. So the magnet's on, that's not moving. Here I've got my 1/4 inch drill bit, and it is perfectly centered, so now I can just go ahead and drill that to the depth that I need, change out this 1/4 for the tap drill bit size, and we're pretty much good to go. Here is the tap drill size, and as you can see, that drill bit just goes down in there so sweet. Doesn't even hit the plate or anything, and that's very close. That's like, I think, close to a 9/16 drill bit. It's a 5/8 hole, so very close tolerances. So here it is. It's my 3rd hole that I've got drilled and tapped. As you can see, that goes in there really slick. So I'm pretty happy with that. I just got one more to do here, and then I can go ahead and get that plate bolted on here, put this back on upside down, then I can get this tack welded up underneath, and then I'll take the whole thing down and weld it right here. This was also one of those jobs that took way longer than I was expecting or hoping. But anyways, we've got 4 holes here, got our plate over there. Now I've got to run to the store and get the correct length bolts. I think it's going to be like 1 inch, something like that. I got to measure them, make sure I get the right length, maybe 1 1/4 inches, whatever it is. I got to get them. Then I can bolt that on, bolt this up, upside down, and then keep going. All right, we've got that plate bolted on there. Everything looks fine there. I did have to cut, these were 2-inch bolts. I had to cut them down to 1 3/4 inches, and I used a metric 16 flat washer. That gives it a really nice clean look. All right, so we got the bolster back on, the weight bracket, and as you can see, our plate. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this on the axle pivot, and then I'll lift up this axle with the engine crane right here, so that way it'll simulate the wheels, you know, on the tractor sitting under its own weight. All right, so I just wanted to show this angle. That's what the bracket's going to look like. I don't know how well you can see that in this light. I won't know until I'm editing. But basically, as you can see here, that's very tight. And I've got this big gap I can weld now on both sides. And as you can see, that's pretty much centered side to side, perfect. And it's going to be open on the side so that I can get my wrench in there to undo those bolts and nuts. And as you can see, there's another gap there. I'm going to tack that in place and then remove this whole bolster. I call it a bolster, but this is a weight bracket. I'm going to remove the whole weight bracket, flip it upside down. That way I can finish welding this while it's still bolted to the tractor. I'm not a very good welder overhead, you know, and in this instance, so I'm much more confident in taking it off the tractor and finish welding it. So anyway, after a tremendous amount of work, this is my bracket, and I'm very excited to get the wheels on this thing. You guys have no idea. It's been sitting here for way too long with this platform, mice getting in there and everything else. So I want this platform gone. In order to have that gone, I need these wheels on the front of the tractor. So there's a better view. So I just wanted to take a minute and show you guys, before I weld this, how I'm getting this centered with the rear pivot. So I've got this supported with the crane here. So it's as if the tractor was sitting on the ground on its own weight, its own wheels. And as you can see here, this axle is drooped down in the lowest position. And if you lift that up, you'll kind of feel a slight, like, detent in the middle. And that is where that bushing and pin come flat on the main bushing, if that makes sense. So whenever I go like that, essentially what I do is I'll come in here and I'll put these shims pretty much right where they need to be, where I feel that center detent was. So then I can go ahead and I can just tack weld this, and it should be zero lash on that rear bushing, and then this bushing should be pretty much true. Alright, so I just got done tack welding this. In all theory, I should be able to undo the chain stress. And this thing in the front that I had bracing it up. Okay. This thing should go side to side just perfect, like it's doing. So very happy with that, guys. I think that's going to be a really strong bracket. All right, so here it is. Those are the two tack welds, and I had some mechanics wire I put in there in order to keep it from drawing closer when I tack welded it. So anyway, that should be good. I'm going to lay a thin bead in there as a root, do the other side, that way it won't pull one side or the other, and I'll get this sucker welded in. All right, guys, so here we are burning the night oil out here in the parking lot. So anyway, I wanted to show you, this is 3 passes, a root, a cover, and then another cover. So not perfect, but I dare say that looks pretty darn good for what it is. So anyway, let's do the other side. I've gotten 2 passes on the other side. I just need to finish up that cover. Then this will be ready for paint. All right, so I went ahead and put another pass on, just because, you know, this thing is holding on the front of the tractor, so I want that to be nice and sturdy. So just about done. Here it is, guys. Pretty much the finished product. I just got to do a little more cleanup. I'm going to take this bracket off, clean this all up, paint them both, then stick it on the tractor. I'm happy to say that there's 0 warpage. I think because that big chunk of steel acted like a heat sink, it pulled a lot of the heat from the pieces I was welding. I took some time to paint the back side of this weight bracket, and also some of that down there, just because it'll be hard to paint once this is all together. And I've also got some blue, nice Ford blue on the axle pivot. So that'll look kind of nice once that's all together. All right, just in case anyone was wondering, we're at like 27 pounds, something like that. 26, 27 pounds. So that's our finished bracket for the front axle. Before I put this axle underneath the tractor, I'm going to take off my cap that I made, put grease in it, and then also, see how this pin here has a rib from wear? I'm going to put the new side down, just like this, so that the new pin, or the new side of the pin, is in the new bushing. So I'm going to probably put a little bit of paint on that, make it all pretty. We'll go from there. Now, I just want to make this very clear. Because we've got half of an exhaust bushing and half of an original bushing, that pin will end somewhere like, I think it takes like 1/4 of this hardened bushing. So we're going to make sure that we have the grease in this thing at all times to keep that, you know, that soft steel of the exhaust piece, my bushing that I made, lubricated so it won't wear out. So basically I'm going to take some of this wheel bearing grease, I'm going to pack that in there. I'm then going to seal this with some gasket sealer, put this on here like that, and then I'm going to have a grease point so that I can grease this, and grease will go all the way through the front of that. Now, the only reason I'm doing this now is because this is going to take up a lot of area where there's no grease. Because like I said, only like 1/4 of that bushing is going to see the pin. So I'm just going to stuff as much bearing grease as I can in here. That way I'm not sitting here pumping my grease gun the whole frickin' 20 minutes or whatever it is. So now that's all sealed up, I'm going to go ahead and get some paint on that, just because why not? Go ahead and grease this new side of the pin. I'll grease the pin, put that in, then we'll hang the front axle. Now that's all blue, I'm going to go ahead and put this thing in. One thing I wanted to note, this is a bolt that I'm using that holds this pin in. So I drilled this bolt for a cotter pin, just because if this nut ever comes loose and that pin falls out, that whole axle is going to come right out of there. So a cotter pin is definitely a worth investment. Alright guys, there it is. Pretty much done. Very happy with the way that turned out, the way it looks, the way it functions, and all that good stuff. The only thing I don't love is that, you see that gap on the bottom? I don't know if you can, camera picks that up. Can the camera see the gap? Alright, see the gap on the bottom? There's no gap on the top. And I think between welding and paint and everything, it made that just a little bit tighter. But that's okay, that'll wear in as it gets driven. Because the vehicle, as the tractor's being driven, the front axle is going to be pushing back that way. So after a while, you know, that'll move in and break in and loosen up. But I mean, it's not the end of the world. Just a little tighter than I was hoping for, but also it could be that the paint in there that's pretty thick paint for what it is. So anyway, it's done, guys. I'm very happy with the way it turned out. Got a lot of work and time into this thing, so it's awesome to see the front axle on the tractor permanently. It's not going to come off unless there's some serious issue. One thing I want to point out too, guys, is that the axle right here, if you'll notice, it's pitched ahead just a little bit. Whenever it was the other way around, it was pitched backwards. So now it's pitched ahead just a little bit. It's going to have less caster, which, you know, not the end of the world. It is a tractor. It's not like we're going down the road 40 miles an hour. So it might track. The caster allows the vehicle to go straight without having to hold the steering wheel the whole time. Like a chopper, you know, a motorcycle chopper has that big long rake, has a really long caster, and goes really, really straight really well. But this thing, it's not going to notice a difference, I don't believe. But I did want to point that out. I don't know if that picks up, but basically this flat plate here is twisted just a little bit, and that's going to twist the front axle just a little bit, but not the end of the world. Mouse built at home or something in there. Anyway. Oh man. Where should I have it set to before? So that was where it was before. Right there. I don't know if I'm going to keep it that wide. Alright, so this is kind of a big moment here. I'm going to finally take the cribbing out from underneath the tractor that's been holding it up for the last, I don't know, bunch of months. And I'm going to block up the front end so I can take out the planks out of the middle. And we can get working on taking this cribbing out of here. Hopefully all goes well. We are off the cribbing. Look at that. See how it feels. A lot of creaking going on. It's a lot of weight right there. It's being supported by its own weight right now. How awesome is that right now? This is great. How cool is this? Awesome. So I am extremely excited, guys. I know it's hard to see because all these leaves, but there's nothing under the tractor anymore, guys. The front axle is totally supporting the weight. Finally got these jack stands underneath that axle. But as you can see here, we are totally free of any blocking. So I've got to clean this up. I want to air this tire up. I know this workspace is a mess. I want to clean this up a little bit. Air this tire up so it doesn't ruin the tire. It's starting to get cold out here, guys, and I want to be able to bring this in the winter time and work on it. So soon I'll have the tie rods so I can put the tires on and at least roll it around. So I am just so happy. This is a huge milestone. We got a lot more work to do, guys, but this is a long-awaited sight to see. It's been like 7 months that it's been sitting here on the cribbing. I've gone ahead and put one of the tires on just to kind of get an idea as to what it might look like. I flipped it so it's reverse of what it normally is. Don't know if I like that look or not. I'll try it the other way just to kind of see, but it looks now like the tires are really small. Looking kind of neat, looking like a tractor again. I flipped the tire around, now it's like it normally would be. And I don't know, I kind of like the look of that, but those tires are bald, and I'm sure with a fresh set of 750 16s, that thing would really look a lot taller. Let me know what you guys think. Do I go with a 1000 16 and get a bigger rim, which is kind of a lot of expense to go through, or do I just go with a nice clean 750 16 tri-rib similar to, or do I do a 4-rib? What should I do here? What do you guys think? So it's time to start thinking about steering. When it comes to steering on this tractor, it's going to be a little difficult to figure out as far as parts and pieces. So as you can see here, I put a tire on just to kind of get an idea as to where things are going to be, and I put one of the old tie rods back on. And as you can see, it has the adjustable front axle, which I want to maintain. So basically, see, one hole here out equals one hole here on the tie rod. Now, because of this big, massive harmonic balancer, we don't have any room for the original guts of the power steering. So it used to be that a drag link would connect to the steering box here and go right beside the engine block into this hole here, and then it would connect to the steering in there. So obviously we don't have that anymore, and what we're left with here is just kind of two tie rods that aren't connected. So that can be fixed. On this side I've got the tie rod back in place and just kind of line them up. So here I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to reuse these parts, because these parts are really easy to find for the power steering. You can get outer tie rods, tie rod tubes, and you can get pretty much everything for these things, no problem. This is what would have been on the inside of this tie rod, where the steering in the middle would just move back and forth, and that's how this thing would have steered. One interesting thing to note is that on these tie rods, both left and the right, they use 1-inch thread by 16 TPI, just regular threads, no left-hand threads. So these are both the same threads on the left and the right. So this is kind of what I have in mind here. I'm going to machine on the lathe a piece about 10 inches long, and it's going to have 3 inches of threads on either side to simulate this. And then it's just going to be a big chunk in the middle that connects the two pieces. So I'm going to machine that so I can connect. So at least that way I'll have a tie rod that's one piece. And that way these parts are easily accessible. And also if I want to widen the front end down the road, let's just say if I want to bring this out or bring it in, I can still do that, and it's still adjustable just as a factory intended. It would be ideal if I had a donor tractor, like a 5610 or something like that. That way I could use all of the guts, the power steering, you know, because these are orbital valves up here for full power steering. And then I could just have a ram down here with hydraulic lines. It'd be perfect, it'd be seamless. But I don't. I can't find those tractors cheap enough to warrant taking the parts from them. So what we're going to do is instead, I'd like to use a power steering conversion kit. Basically, it would take a manual steering tractor here and connect to the power steering. I'll show a picture up on the screen here. So that's kind of what I would like to use in this application. I would love to use a full hydraulic steering setup. However, I would have to then replace this with an orbital valve, and those are very expensive. Plus, I would then have to custom make lines to go from here all the way down to the ram under there, and that would be expensive. Again, I don't have a parts tractor to give me the parts and pieces that I would need, so we'd be looking at spending a significant amount of money. As it stands now, buying the power steering kit, the adapter kit, and buying all the front pieces, I'm going to be close to $1,000. The closest power steering, like full power steering, hydraulic control power steering, is around $1,500, but it doesn't include the pump. So then you have to buy a pump, and so I'd be $2,000, $2,500 by the time I do that. And I have to draw the line somewhere, guys. I've got a ton of money in this project, and there's going to be a lot more I got to spend to finish it. So let me show you what I have in mind. So this is a piece that I thought was going to be the missing link. This is part number 3131J. It's funny because this arm on the tractor here is 3131A. Designates power steering. This designates manual steering. However, as you can see, this is longer than this. So after doing some research, this is the only arm that they make, as far as I can tell, that was for a manual steering 5,000 or 7,000. They don't make a shorter one. So what I'm going to have to do is to take, obviously this one will be gone. This one is a 31A. I'm going to have to replace this one over here, which is a 3130A, with a 3130J. Same length as this. So then, once I get that done, that's going to bring this tie rod out, like here. I want to make it clear though what I'm doing, guys. I want to be able to get parts easily for this tractor. I don't want to have to get parts. I want to be able to get them. I can't get these manual steering parts anywhere. I look for a manual steering tie rod tube. They don't exist. They make a manual steering end with threads on it, because you need to at least adjust this tie rod somehow. So they make an end that has threads on it that has a female tie rod, and I can't find those anywhere. But I can find power steering stuff all day long. So anyway, I figured if I use these pieces, I'll be able to get parts for them. I can get these all day long. So if any of this stuff breaks, I'll be able to replace it. Now guys, when it comes to the power steering, I want to show you guys what is going on. If I turn this wheel to the left, you'll see the arm goes forward. If I turn the wheel, if you can see my hand, if I turn this to the right, you'll see the steering wheel goes back. This is wrong for a manual steering application. So let's just say, for instance, I'm turning left. Okay, it's bringing this arm backwards. What happens if we pull this backwards? See that? We're turning to the right. So what would happen is if I use this steering box for a power steering, it would be opposite, right? So I'd turn to the left, this tractor would go right. Turn to the right, the tractor would go left. So I'm going to have to get a manual steering box, which is the same footprint as this, take my arm off, and go from there. So I'll need a manual steering gearbox, I'll need the power assist ram, and I'll need some more parts up here. I'll show you guys what I come up with. All right, so let's go turn this into steel. All right, so I've selected my 1¼ inch cold rolled carbon steel, nothing crazy. This will be plenty strong. These tie rods are cast. These are not like hardened or anything special like that. So this is going to be just as strong as this stuff. Actually, this steel here is probably going to be harder and stronger than one of the tie rods. So anyway, 1.25 inches is the same thickness as the outer tie rod tube. And we need to turn this down to 950 thousandths, about 3 inches, to mimic the original threads. So we're going to turn that down to 3 inches, and then we're going to do a single point thread, 16 threads per inch, and we'll go from there. Alright, so I got this turned down to size, and I've got maybe 1/4 inch extra, because it is easier to remove pieces of material than it is to make more material. So anyway, that's 3 1/4 worth of threads. Should be fine. And I just mimicked the outside diameter of the old tie rod, so we should be right on. Now I'm going to start using my single point threading tool. So I've made a couple light scratches there, and this is my 16 thread per inch gauge, and as you can see, it's pretty much right on the money. Beautiful. So I'm going to go finish this out and try the nut on there before I'm all done, and we'll hopefully have a really nice set of threads. Alright, so we're right about 50 thousandths deep, and this is the moment of truth here. If I can get this started. Beautiful. That is what I like to see. Let's see if there's any shudder. A little bit. By the time you put grease or anti-seize in there, it's going to be fine. Beautiful. I love it. Alright, so here we are. This is the old PTO shaft from an old F932 front mower that I had. I was going to throw it out, but I decided to keep it, and I'm glad I did because it's been coming in handy. Anyway, we're going to lop this off right here. One thing I've found is that I kind of become spoiled having a lathe, especially when it comes to like making marks on metal, because I can just go like this and get like the truest line you've ever had. Alright, so there's the other side, guys. We are at 16 threads per inch, and this is the nut that is going to do our testing, I guess. And let's just see if I can line it up here. Beautiful. Sorry about the camera, guys. So there is the piece. Alright, so there it is on one side of the tie rod. And I threaded all this just because I wanted to have all this adjustability. I figured it's not going to lose any strength. I mean, this is only 1/8 inch tube, for crying out loud. And this is 1 1/4 inch solid stock. So there we go, guys. That is the tie rod clearance with the original power steering arms. The new ones are going to be like a 1/2 inch longer, so I think we should be all right with the clearance there. It's very close. As you can see, we still have, though, like 1.5 inches of clearance. This allows me to use off-the-shelf parts that are readily available, and this piece kind of joins the original hardware, which, yeah, I'll get new tie rods while I'm in here. But other than that, I don't have to modify anything. Okay, so this should take care of my steering column problem. This will stove up, doesn't it? So that should be a good steering column. Wow, those threads are all banged up. Oh, look at that. That thing is cracked. Crying out loud. So anyway, long story short, this one was broken, and I asked for a return so I could get another one, and they just refunded my money. And basically here I have a steering box. Anyway, this thing is pretty straightforward. So basically, I'm turning this thing, and as you can see, that's just a big threaded rod, and that's going back and forth. So essentially what's happening is the threads on this are different than the threads on the 5000. So I'm actually going to take the neck off of this, and I'm going to slide this out, and it might even fit on my steering box. Alright, so as we can see, this basically just has a big screw ball bearings in there. And then this piece just goes around the steering shaft and goes up and down and does its thing. So that's kind of cool. So anyway, I'm going to get this box off of here and see what that'll do for us. Wow, that's on there. Oh, there's a dowel pin. Oh. We can see everything in there. Look, the clutch, the throw bearing. Look at that. I can see everything in there. I can even grease my throw bearing from up here. How cool is that? So there that is. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing cleaned out, and hopefully this thing will come apart so that I can investigate and see if these parts are going to swap over. Otherwise, I might just be wasting my time. Okay, so these are the two steering columns. And as you can see, this is the only difference between the columns. It's just that one worm gear goes one way and the other goes the other. So we're going to try to take this bad unit right here and put it in our original Ford case. Okay, so here we go, guys. That is a much tighter fit. And as you can see, we've got a little gap here. And as gummy as these are, I might even be able to just use this shim pack that they made out of gaskets. I mean, I don't see why that wouldn't work, because we've only got this many of the steel gaskets. So we'll try that. But anyway, I just wanted to show you. That's working really well. That does need a little preload on those bearings, so I'm going to mess with this and see if I can get the preload just right, and then we'll go from there. With a combination of those steel and those paper gaskets, I was able to get, I think, a pretty much perfect preload. So as you can see, I can turn this by hand. You know, it's harder than no preload to turn, but all those bearings are moving, and all these bearings are rolling as I turn. And whenever I tighten this down, before I did, there was just a little shudder up and down on this shaft, and as you can hear, there's still, you know, you really can't hear it. But anyway, I think that's pretty much perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and put this thing in circulating worm gear thing, and I'm going to put the original shaft back in, and I think we should be in good shape here. Alright, so we've got that in there pretty much for the final time. Now I'm going to go ahead and put that the shaft in there and see if all this lines up and works good. So I managed to take this seal out of there. It wasn't really held in by much. Anyway, I'm going to reuse that on the new box. So we're going to tighten this box up, and hopefully this will be just as good as a brand new box. Alright, so basically the way this works is this thing just sets down in there, and this thing is tapered. And then we have this little guy that just goes on there, okay? And then on this plate that holds this round piece right there so that this piece doesn't twist like that. So what keeps this thing all tight, the tension, the squish, are these shims. There's 3 shims that I recovered from the old, this is the old panel. And I'm going to use this nice gasket over again, and that'll give us a little bit more. So I think we're pretty much ready to put this sucker back together. And just put some grease in this thing for now. I'm not quite sure what fluid to add, but the new one came with hard grease, so I figured why not put hard grease in this one too. Plus, I think that'll be perfectly fine for right now. And as you can see, this is kind of the action underneath that arm. This piece goes on there like that. It's all kind of neat. This is really simple, easy to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing together, and I'll show you guys what it looks like after we're all done. So here we go. I got the shims and the gasket that came on the new box, and that's just about perfect. There's 0 end play, in fact a little bit of preload. So let me just show you. Like, this thing turns really nice and easy for what it is. This is the arm that came with the new steering box, but that's not going to be used. I don't even know what that's for. I don't think it's for a 5000. So anyway, that's it, guys. I mean, how cool is that? So we've got a new steering box, well, guts from a new steering box in our old original steering box, so that makes me happy. So it's kind of cool because this didn't cost me anything. I ordered this steering box and it was broken. This ear was broken right off, and I wanted them to send me a new one, and they just gave me a refund. I guess they didn't want to deal with shipping it back. This should be the ticket to making my steering work. Yeah, there you go. That's the part number. I don't know if that does any good. Anyway, this is a power assist steering system, and I bought this. I thought it came from Wisconsin, but it says made in Turkey, so these are probably all the same. I've seen a bunch of these floating around the interweb, so let me show you what this is. So this is what's in the box. Basically, wow, that's an old beat up tractor. Basically, this is what I got here. These are all the components. These are all the components to make your manual tractor into a power steering tractor. So I ordered this one, about 500 bucks. This one had however, the steel reservoir, which is what I wanted. I didn't want the junk plastic. So that's kind of cool. Steel reservoir. Also, this has the hydraulic pump. That'll bolt right on my motor. It's got the ends that I need. And, of course, the ram that's in here. As you can see, it's in there in the bottom. So anyway, that's what I need. So let's go see if... See, this is the part that I'd ordered for my front end. And this is the steering box. Now that it's a manual steering box, it'll turn the right way. So this is basically... My goodness gracious, you can't have anything, can you? So this is basically what I need to make this steering system work. So this is the piece that's just like 1/4 inch metal. I was envisioning that to be much more. Anyway, that's the piece that bolts right there to the frame of the tractor. And we're going to have to make that. We're going to have to make that on the frame rail. All right, so here we have the new piece. This is the J-coated arm. As you can see, that's a little bit longer and a little bit lower. So hopefully that'll correct our issues. So I'm going to go ahead and put this one and the other one on the tractor, and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so we got this side on. That's still got plenty of room to clear the wheel. So anyway, that side is on, and I got this side on, all with the J-series arms. Turns out my clearance, I had nothing to worry about. I've got tons of room for the oil pan, so I've got nothing to worry about there. So that's awesome news. In my mind, I see a picture of what I want, so I'm going to try to start putting pieces up here and seeing what it looks like. Gone ahead and I've put the axle about where I want it as far as width goes. You know, I've got it spaced pretty well, I think. And even though the tractor looks like it's tilting this way, it is, but the front end's pretty much on plane. So I just kind of threw this ram on there to kind of see what I'm up against here. I wanted to kind of see if it was going to fit, and this is supposed to be upside down. As you can see, this is supposed to be kind of like that. But obviously this is 10.5 inches forward, because 10.5 inches is how much longer this engine is than the old one, and I can't use this, of course, because it's supposed to be out here. But I flipped this upside down, and I really like the look of that. That would save me from having to build a bracket and have this down here. The only thing is, I don't know, is going to be this arm right here that goes back to the steering box. Now, because that's going to come out here, and it's pretty much going to want to hit this. So, not quite sure how that's going to work. I'll do some more figuring, but regardless, if you were to draw a straight line from here to that steering box, you'll see the frame is in the way. So I don't think we'd be able to make a straight piece anyway. So I might have to make a piece that goes out and then takes a bend and goes back to the steering box. And that's pretty much level. So that way, as the suspension twists, that will be right in the middle and it won't pull the steering one way or the other. So I kind of like the look of that, not gonna lie. All right, so I've kind of got this mocked up now about where I want it. I kind of have to hold this joint, but basically, let me show you the way this works. So that goes full lock to lock, and obviously I'm going to have to make this bar different. I'm going to have to bend this back into the steering bar, which won't be the end of the world. And I'm going to have to add in about 10 inches of tube, which I kind of planned on doing that anyway, so that's not the end of the world. But I mean, look how sweet this works. It goes full lock, side to side, full lock, and there's still 5/8 of an inch on this side of the ram, and whenever the wheel is all the way this way, there's 5/8 of an inch here, so it's perfectly centered. Plus I've got adjustability here and here, so that is like awesome. So I got the steering box pretty much centered now, and that works great after I rebuilt it. As you can see, there's like zero play there whatsoever. For a bunch of off-the-shelf parts, this is coming together pretty darn slick. Now, one other thing I have to be mindful of is I have to kind of keep this all level. I don't want any of this to have a higher lift in the back than the front. So that way, whenever the front axle goes like this, I won't have weird steering pull. So I got those holes drilled just about perfectly. And one thing I will say is that this bracket is not exactly made perfectly square or straight. As you can see that by the gap here, it kind of goes uphill. I drilled those holes perfectly 1 inch from the center, and that's not exactly an inch, but I wanted to show you these have been pressed with like a machine. You can see how it's kind of dimpled. These have been pressed, and they've obviously been pressed very quickly without measuring them. But anyway, that'll be good enough. And yes, I am weakening this metal by drilling those holes in it, but we've still got like 5 inches of 5/8 plate here, so I think that's plenty strong. And there's still a good, 5/8 of an inch here. So I've gone ahead and put this bracket on there, and I've used some lock nuts with the appropriate washers, and I'm hoping that'll be fine, and that there won't be any deflection as the steering moves. If there is, I might have to make a bracket to the engine block somewhere just to kind of beef that up, but that is some pretty thick material there. So hopefully this will be the last time that I have to put this on. Yeah. Nice. Full lock right there. Got ourselves about 5/8 of an inch. Full lock this way. We still got ourselves about 5/8 of an inch, so that's like floating right in the middle of its range. One other thing I'm doing, as you can see, I've got this tie rod or ball joint, whatever you want to call it, this end cranked all the way until it bottoms out, so that this doesn't just droop down. I may keep it like this, or I may machine a nice aluminum spacer so that that can be neutral, but I haven't quite figured that out yet. I'm thinking right there is going to be pretty decent for right now. To complete this steering rod, I heated this up and put a nice bend in it. What we're going to do is that we're going to make, basically I'll cut this here and I'll get a piece of tube to weld in place. And then we're going to have a really nice clean looking steering setup. So the piece I've got chucked up in my lathe is actually just a piece of water pipe. But it just so happens to be like the exact same dimension as my steering tube that came with the kit. So as you can see, I cut a nice bevel on that. And I'm going to put this piece in the lathe and I'll true that up and put a nice bevel on it. And then I can do a really good weld. So that's the beauty of having a lathe at your disposal, is that you can do a lot of stuff like this that normally you'd just do with a grinder. Okay, so this is what the rod looks like after it's all done being welded. Those welds aren't perfect, but down here I was able to put this piece in the lathe and get this all smoothed up, so that looks kind of nice. So anyway, this is that a good angle that shows the bend? This is what it looks like. Kind of weird looking, but let me show you what it looks like on the tractor, and I'll be happy with it. So this is what we're looking at. Obviously nothing's tight. This is just kind of put on here. We're supposed to get some rain, that's why the tarp's back on. So anyway, I'm really happy with the way that looks. It's a little tight here. I might have to do some grinding, but we'll see. I'll make the steering go full lock to lock. But that's kind of the way I designed it in my head, and I'm happy to see that it worked out in real life. Lock to lock on that one side. It's hitting the steering knuckle locks. Now we'll go back, and I'm seeing plenty of clearance, which I'm overjoyed about. That way I don't have to modify this. And just look perfect. And even if the suspension moves a little bit, I don't think it's going to hit right there. Very happy with that. Cool. And here's a view of it from the operator's seat. I'm really happy with the way that bend worked out. I think that's just about right. And that's going to be cool because I won't have to modify anything. I'm very happy with that. I'm elated right now, guys. It's just, there's always a tremendous amount of work behind the scenes trying to find parts and pieces that fit these tractors, because these tractors are everywhere, but there's not a lot of information on there and how they interchange with other models. So I'm super, super happy to see this come together. You can see the float in that valve there. It's kind of neat. We're backing off. The power steering is, I think, pretty much done. So all I've got left to do now is I got some new tie rods. I'm going to put those on. And then I can adjust for the final time my toe. And I'll do that here shortly. So that's the old one. And this is the new one. We got a nice boot. I'm gonna go ahead and put some anti-seize on there. Put that back in. Now we can go ahead and put this all together, do the other side. So every time you deal with aftermarket parts, it's always kind of a hit or miss. So that one tie rod on the passenger side, I had to grind all the paint off this because I was having to hammer this into this tube, and that was not okay. So anyway, now it fits good. I probably won't end up painting this. I'll just put grease on this. That way it won't rust in place. This is how you line up one of these old tractors. I know it's a little primitive, but basically got a straight edge here with a weight in the center. That way whenever I push my tape measure against it, it doesn't move it away from the tire. And we have one on the other side, just like it. So I'm gonna go ahead and measure. I want about 1/4 or 1/2 inch toe in. Other than that, doesn't have to be perfect by any means, but this will get it very close. Okay, so we need about probably 1 turn out of this tie rod. So what I did was, I don't know if you remember when I made this piece in the middle, makes it very easy to adjust this. So basically all I have to do is just loosen that up. This is all hand tight. We'll just give it 1 turn, and that'll probably get us very close to being right on. We'll reset our little blocks. And guys, I found these on the side of the road for free. If anyone knows what these are, could you just write it in the comment? I've got 4 of them. They were on the side of the road for free, so I grabbed them. I really don't know what they're for, but they're kind of cool. So, we are now at 74 13/16. Call it 74 3/4 just for easy math. And 75 1/16. So there's 5/16 of an inch. 3/8. I'd say that's pretty darn good. So anyway, that's how we're gonna do this real quickie alignment. And I just sighted down each of these wheels to make sure they're about as parallel as possible to the rear wheels. And that's it. We're gonna go ahead and tighten down this tie rod connector that I made on both sides. We're then gonna take it apart, clean it, paint it, put it all back together. That is our completed tie rod. As you can see, it's perfect length, ready to go. I can still use my adjustability for the tie rods if I want to make the axle wider or shorter. So none of that's been compromised in our swap here. And I'm very happy with how sturdy that is. Okay, sorry about the glare, but here we go. Tie rod is all painted. It's just hanging out here, drying in the sun. We'll go ahead and put that on once I can actually touch it. So I'm going to take this opportunity while the front axle is off the ground and grease this grease fitting that I added. Because while the suspension is off the ground, that is unloaded, and that'll take the most grease, and that'll get the grease around where it's got to be, around that pin. So I guess we'll just give this a bunch of good pumps. All right, so I'm going to let this tractor down for the first time on its own wheels, I think since the motor came out of this tractor. So these are still loose, so you'll watch this will kind of move a little bit, but we'll tighten those after we get the wheels on the ground. So here we go. Wow, look. We are on the ground. That tire needs some air. Wow, look at it. Look at it, guys. We're on the ground with its own wheels. Now it looks like it sits really low in the front for some reason. I think I need bigger front tires. I bumped up the air pressure a little bit in the front tires, but those things are wiped out. I mean, these are absolutely destroyed. I'm going to get new tires. I don't know what size, but definitely going to get some new tires. Let me know if you guys have any ideas on what I should do for front tires on this thing so it doesn't sit so low in the front. These are 750 16s. Maybe I should go the next size up, like a 1000. But let me know. I don't know what anyone else is running, so I think a new set of those tires would probably look a lot beefier. So that's the spacing I think I'm going to stay with for now. I'm happy with that. I think it basically lines up on the inside of the tire there on the rear. I'm happy with that. That looks so good. So now we can finally take and move this thing around because it's November now and it's getting cold out, and I want to be able to work on this thing in the wintertime in the shop. So now I can pull this thing in and out of the shop, and I can steer it, and I can do whatever I got to do, and then put it back outside when I'm not working on it. So that's a major milestone, guys. I haven't had the tractor supported by its own wheels for months, probably like 7 months. So this is awesome. I didn't show this. This is going to be in the next video. A couple other things. I just put the grill shell on here just to kind of see what it would look like so I can start fitting, you know, the radiator and other pieces together. That'll be in the next video. I think the next video, this thing's going to run. I'm going to show you guys the fuel tank modifications. Everything just kind of fell into place, guys. I'm super happy with this. Everything just kind of works. So it's almost like Ford engineered these tractors to be manipulated and cobbled together. I'll show you more of that starter later. So thanks for staying with me through these long videos, and hopefully you guys can get some entertainment or information out of these videos. But the next video is going to be all about getting this thing running. That'll be the next big push. So there's probably going to be 2 more videos following. So anyway, we'll see you guys in the next one.